Where are all the women on Sora 2? Business Insider thinks not having women around in the AI video world could be a nightmare for OpenAI. The new warning out there that just a small number of malicious files, like 250 of them, can actually corrupt LLMs any size. As if AI in Taiwan wasn't enough conflict, the Senate decided to pass a crackdown on Chinese biotech. German researchers found another undocumented backdoor in Unitree robots. I'm going to break down the mathematics of digital memory and how Anthropic solved an impossible problem. Dr. Swarandu AI has a pretty interesting article about eigenvalues. Don't worry, I'm still going to talk about how you can get rich with AI. No, Farid Ali, he wrote this article. I tried trading with agentic AI. It's mind-blowing. Is using AI as a music tool cheating the world of content creation? And we're going to talk about this Wired magazine. Vibe coding is the new open source, but in the worst way possible. But more important than hidden cameras watching you while you sleep or eigenvalues below 3, the hype button on YouTube. That helps little channels like mine. So yeah, hit that hype button. Now let's get into it. Business Insider is asking, where are all the women on Sora, like the social network? Well, here's my channel. There's a woman doing the trolley problem. There's a woman. That's Julia McCoy, though, so kind of a friend. That's a woman. Audrey Hepburn fixing a muscle car. Dang. Oh, but of course, they're not talking about AI video of women. We have plenty of that. Business Insider is pointing out how OpenAI's new app social media platform Sora 2 is already showing troubling signs because its user base looks overwhelmingly male. Mostly teenage boys, to be honest. I don't know why. If you have thoughts, let me know, because they're kind of creating a space where it feels sort of unwelcoming to women, and then that's going to make it even harder for them to get in on it. I would have thought like all the guys would have been on X. You know, I felt like that was where they were going to take off all the guardrails, and maybe he'll even let nudity and stuff and all that just kind of go rampant, you know? And then I felt like they were going to position themselves at the OpenAI team as the more kind of for everyone, general sort of platform. So I'm surprised it's skewing so male right now. There's other things we can worry about instead. So how about how size doesn't matter? I don't know if that worries you, but when it comes to LLMs, it definitely worries me. Turns out just a small number of malicious files can corrupt these huge large language models of any size. So researchers from Anthropic, they're working with the UK AI Security Institute and the Alan Turing Institute, and they discovered that even their massive AI models that seem like they are kind of unmovable can be compromised with as little as 250 malicious files. So their experiments reveal that the model size doesn't reduce vulnerability. Adding more clean data doesn't dilute the risk. The finding overturns the sort of assumption that if you just build volume, the bigger models, they're naturally more resilient because they've seen so much more. You can't push them around as easy. So then why is it that this happens? Like, what's the weakness? And it turns out that it's not in the scale. Adding more parameters, more data, that doesn't help. It's in the way the system is designed to trust. And surprisingly, I didn't think something like this would work as well as it does. All right, Biotech is coming in hot. Biotech and the language of DNA is now combining with the language of artificial intelligence, and crazy breakthroughs seem like they're happening weekly now. Maybe that's why the U.S. Senate has passed a bipartisan amendment known as the Biosecurity Act. It is aiming to block taxpayer funding and federal contracts from going to Chinese biotech firms that are considering this a national security threat. Do you remember the 23andMe thing where it just was like so fun for everybody to find out if they had like wet or dry earwax and like where they were from? You can have data like this from so long ago, and now it ends up in other countries' data banks, and then you use AI and genomic data, and biotech infrastructure now exists that can do all sorts of things that weren't around in the world where we were freely giving up that information. Probably be better if we got a lot of their data and they got a lot of our data, so that it's, like mutually assured destruction if we use it wrong, so people can work together. But then again, how are you going to check all that and what's going to happen? So maybe you should just put up a wall and try to keep everything within your own boundaries. Definitely, I like the idea of trying to protect our data. Just got to admit, the traditional boundary between healthcare and national security is dissolving. Biology, once purely a scientific or humanitarian field, is now seen as a strategic domain like cyberspace or energy. The genetic information stored in hospitals and labs isn't just medical data anymore, it's geopolitical capital. All right, so Superintelligence Lab is now pushing stuff out. I mean, I love all the stuff I usually read from OpenAI and Anthropic, sometimes from Meta, not as frequently, but once in a while. So ideally, having the new Superintelligence Lab come up with an all-star team and start publishing papers should be really pretty interesting. So here's the first paper. It is Refrag, R-E-F-R-A-G in all caps. They figured out how you can take most of the document chunks when you are retrieving them from somebody's query and figure out where those chunks should be based on a compact embedding. So, i.e. compressed representation of all of those chunks that make up those documents, and then you use the RAG, the retrieval augmentation. I always imagine it like using an LLM to go into a database and pull a fact out. It's more complicated than that, but that's my overview. And this matters because those compressed representations, those new embeddings, are actually kind of a language, but you're talking to it with static data. Pretty neat, actually. Imagine some crazy string of words that just seems like garbage to us, but that actually references a real file that isn't part of the kind of thing that you can invent out of thin air. It's not part of just reaching into the latent space. It's actually stored somewhere where somebody can check it. And it's a fact, like a piece of data. Anyway, the result, lower memory and attention costs. Things move faster. You get less latency. You get better benchmark performances. So yeah, just kind of a good move forward. All right, next up, let's go look at Jack Clark's opinion/research of some stuff that's going on. Import AI 430. This is a blog post to call it, an article, a thought experiment. Has 3 striking AI developments kind of all wrapped into it. A RAND report is warning that a belief in an AGI's power could push nations towards a preemptive strike. All right, so just let me break that down. Believing the AGI is going to be insane, which I do, is also something that is pushing us towards preemptive strikes, starting a war. Very scary correlation there. Researchers uncovered a hidden surveillance backdoor in the Unitree humanoid robots. There's a book, you've probably heard of it, Eliezer Yudkowsky. If anyone builds it, everyone dies. I'm kind of a doomer myself. I get a little worried about this stuff. All these things coming together are a little bit freaky, and Jack Clark sort of covers them all here. This weird cyclical thing, the RAND paper says that simply believing AGI will change everything could make war more likely. That belief, an idea, not a fact, can alter global stability as much as any weapons. So think about that. It's like the culture war of masses believing something, of people in politics believing things. There's an interest probably for a lot of people to get people in the United States scared about this and how powerful it is. And it's weird because that's kind of what I do all day long too. This is changing the world. Everybody have a voice. But my thinking is it's supposed to make people aware, to get involved so it doesn't blindside us, because I feel like the more citizens know about it and it's not just in kind of the minds of the richest billionaires in the world who are deploying all this capital, then hopefully that turns into us having a say. But then again, it could just scare society. Okay, so absolutely one of my favorite reads for a while. Definitely of the month, maybe the last couple months. This is just so wild. So Anthropic's trying to get these machines to have more memory, right? And that makes sense because they don't, hold together very well. What they did was not really storing any memories, but storing the kind of patterns of data that can be sort of recompiled into memories. And that seems a lot like the human brain. So unlike humans, AI models like Claude, they're destroyed and recreated constantly. So no true memory could exist in the usual sense. Anthropic solved this by designing a mathematical framework that reconstructs self. So they had to figure out what self actually meant, because it's not a specific thing, from a distributed pattern of context and interaction. So turning memory into a process, not a container. Okay, so the same way that you can be training one of these systems with reinforcement, you can kind of tease out where self is and where self isn't. You can say, if you remember that, does it help you feel like something that had a memory or not? And you just kind of keep poking and prodding and twisting this thing in the same evolutionary way all of this comes together. And then you end up with an AI memory that isn't stored, it's recomputed, it's recompiled, it's rebuilt, but it isn't there. So that a Claude instance, in a sense, would wake up and it would have these patterns in its latent space, and it would just execute on those, and it would make it think that it had a memory, even though it didn't. And then it makes me think, what if every time I go to sleep and wake up, I just think, oh, I've had this memory, I'm Dylan Curious, and I've been through all these years of experience, and this is the kind of person I believe I am. What if that is just all recomputed every morning or something? Is this mirror of shows how the human identity might be sort of an emergent pattern of continuity rather than fixed storage? And if that's true, it sort of blurs the boundary between machines and minds, suggests memory itself is less about what's kept and more about what can be recalled into the moment. So I'm sure there's been many times you've been sitting out under the stars, having a beer with friends, thinking about what is it to understand, to be alive, to be conscious. And, you know, most likely you guys came to the conclusion that it's whenever an eigenvalue drops below 3. Oh, no, that's not how it went down. All right, well, that's true. It's probably not true of anyone. So when eigenvalues drop below 3, the mathematical moment happens where language models start to, quote, understand. Let's dive into this. Dr. Swarmadoo AI wrote this on Medium. He breaks down the problem. Too many meanings, not enough dimensions. Right, so you can imagine the word bank floating around as a token in one of these giant latent spaces, and it has a lot of meanings, right? Like the bank could be a river's edge, a financial institution, the act of tilting, oh yeah, like banking to the left, a storage place, I don't know, blood bank. And you can actually do this dimensional count when you think about how many meanings there are. And in this case, 175,000 meanings divided by 12,000 dimensions ends up about being 14 meanings per dimension. And I always think of these dimensions as just one line, and then 2 as a square, and then 3 as a cube, and then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and just keep going up until you can't visualize it anymore. But everything is kind of adjacent or approximate, or there's some kind of distance measurement that you could still sort of imagine. It just becomes so infinitely dimensional that you can get these crazy distance calculations, and that's where all this magic is in the latent space. But then the reason the models can also sometimes get pretty small and be so incredibly accurate is explained in this math. So the article explores how some smaller models that you can still sort of get your head around or analyze with regular computers like GPT-2 or Llama 2, they appear to understand by analyzing their attention matrices. And what you find is that even though there's so many ways that you can interpret bank, thousands of relationships that could be calculated, there's only 3 eigenvalues that significantly contribute. So only 3 distance measurements that actually tell you the most of what you need to know about banks. So that's why we're starting to get some of these smaller models that are so intelligent. Remember, DeepSeek came in and said, oh, I was cheaper to train, not as big, but I'm doing just as well. Well, because it's got the smaller eigenvalues that matter, the small amount of them, and it threw away the most unimportant stuff. There's even some history about the human brain getting smaller in evolution at the same time we were getting smarter, right? Smaller and smarter sometimes happens, but also sometimes bigger and smarter happens. And I think there's something like this going on. You can either just first sort of scale up and there's more useless stuff in there, but some of the important stuff does emerge, and then you can kind of prune it down and it becomes the best stuff left. So even though I teased you with this article about just how to get rich, Farhad Ali is talking about trading with agentic AI and money, and there is some lessons to learn from it. But actually, the coolest part about it was how he built his little team of researchers. They're all AI agents to work together to then help him make money. So you could also use this for more than just making money. It's a way to think about a specific question in a way that's not general, right? So he was saying, you go to ChatGPT and say, is now a good time to buy Ethereum, right? It will give you sort of a general answer, even if you give it some time to think. But agentic AI really breaks your research team out. So this is a case example of how he made these 4 agents. He's got one agent that's a scout. It's got access to certain things. There's also another agent, the analyst. There's another agent, the contrarian. He actually claims this is the most important one. The role is to be cynical. It's to criticize. It's to take apart with brutal honesty. And then the reporter to actually not try to make assumptions themselves, but accurately report the answer. And the most surprising part of the article was that you can just do it with the normal chat. It's just good prompting. If you really want a good answer, make it think about each of these steps and put them together just easy peasy, easy peasy preasy, or whatever you say, whatever that phrase is. The full form people often say is easy peasy lemon squeezy. What are you talking about? Next up, let's talk about Lisu Miai's article. I made my first AI song with a poem I wrote, and I don't know how I feel about it. Is using AI as a music tool cheating in the world of content creation? I don't know why it feels like audio generation feels significantly different than image or video. Something about hearing beautiful music and symbolism and songs and lyrics and country folk songs and rock stuff and rap stuff just feels more dehumanizing for some reason than a lot of the other stuff that I see generated. Part of me doesn't even want to believe that audio is so good that I almost don't really want to listen to mainstream music anymore. Right, and keep in mind that's very different from supporting real musicians, which I would love to do, and live events are what it's all about. To actually express through a poem what you feel and then have that turned into a song, she just does this really beautiful breakdown. See, here her plan is to feel inner real satisfaction and fight the brain rot. Learn songwriting, play the piano while using AI to make the song with 100% her lyrics. And then the goal is to no longer need AI once she grasps it herself. And then that way she won't feel the guilt of taking anybody's job. All right, so what did I click make? So first, poem goes from this into using just AI LLMs to come up with like a verse, a chorus. After putting on her poet monocle, she sees some of the deep felt metaphors and analogies. They just didn't hold up. Meh. Yeah, and I've just had mixed feelings. For a while there, I used to take my favorite 2 or 3 comments, and then I would turn them into a Suno song to end the video. So I felt the same way she did. The songs were a bit like dirty, a little bit shallow, but also they were incredibly good for a comment turned into a song. I didn't even try to make a rhyme, and it would just figure out ways to find the rhythm in the voices, and that always blew my mind. And the weirdest thing is that if you take some random piece of legal jargon and you turn it into a song, almost the rhythms that it finds to make it sound good are creative. All right, so like we'll take a chunk of this pursuant to the terms and conditions set forth. Okay, that needs a second to generate, so I'm going to cover the last article for the video, and then I'll come back and play that song. Let's talk about this from Wired. Vibe coding is the new open source, and then they think that it's in the worst possible way. So here's the comparison. Vibe coding is sort of free code to give away, right? Like if you just vibe code something together and you kind of know it's not super secure and not a lot of people are going to build off of it, but it's kind of a prototype and you sort of want it to get out there, it's pretty easy to just open source it. It's usually not expensive and time consuming, so it also just tends to be more free. So in that sense, vibe coded code, GitHub repositories that are full of vibe code, they're just more likely to be open sourced, right? And they might appeal to sort of random niches where people who have a lot of time and talent and there's no reason to kind of put all of that into these little niches that aren't important and nobody's going to pay for. So in some sense, this kind of open sourceness and this vibe coding thing are going hand in hand. But what's going to happen is vibe coding software is starting to jump onto GitHub, find these unique solutions, pull it down and connect to it. And now you've got like vibe code on vibe code. Secured code is going out and just finding these little niches and bringing in a package or something. We need to all start realizing that the AI's vibe code grace period is pretty much over. No matter how big you build a system, you can imagine a technological house of cards where a single overlooked vulnerability ripples across a whole bunch of systems. And yeah, if it's hospitals and banks and small businesses, then that sucks. All right, back to our song. So here is the most boring lyrics ever in song form. Hit hype, and here is your beautiful finale for this grand time we spent together.
Pursuant to the terms and conditions set forth herein, notwithstanding any provision to the contrary contained in any prior or contemporaneous agreement, memorandum, or understanding, whether written or all the parties hereby acknowledge, represent, or warrant that this instrument constitutes the entire and exclusive statement, supersede or violations of communications related pursuant to the terms.
Get the fuck out of here, dude. That was crazy. Suno always makes two versions of the lyrics, just in case one's not good.
Set forth herein, notwithstanding any provision to the contrary contained in any prior or contemporaneous agreement, memorandum, understanding, whether written or oral, the parties hereby acknowledge, represent, and warrant that this instrument constitutes the entire and exclusive statements of respective rights, duties, and obligations related thereto.
So you see how, in a sense, it's even more like emotional and creative because it had to force in such a unique set of words. Like, it's just not about three stanzas that all have like the same amount of like symbols in them, or tokens or syllables. Yeah, the same amount of syllables. Your brain's going along with it. You hear it a few times and you start learning the patterns, and you feel the emotion in her voice, which is really where it stands out. We'll see you in the next video.